Last one of the day. How are we doing? Quick show of hands here. How many people here are in product? How many folks are not in product? How many folks don't like raising their hands? Okay, good. So this is, they're over there. Okay. Slightly different talk, actually. I'm going to talk about how to make data-informed product decisions. Really, what I'm going to talk about is how to de-risk product decisions, because that's how I think about how you use data to do it. I'm going to go through a lot of stuff up here. This is like a 45-minute talk, condensed down in about 25. So I might go a little bit fast. If you want to ask questions, I'll be around afterwards at the little happy hour thing, and we can talk about it. Let's jump right in. 90% of product management is building the right things in the right order. Do we agree with that for the most part? Cool. Anyone know who said this, by the way? Yeah. Do you know where this quote came from? You got it right. It came from me. I made it up about 3 nights ago. It feels pretty accurate, though. So I want to talk about how do we do that, right? Most companies I talk to, and so again, UserVoice, we work with a lot of product teams. We help them gather customer feedback. We help them kind of de-risk their roadmap, if you will. What is the first thing we do when we're trying to prioritize a roadmap? Well, one, we have to define what our goals are, right? What is the goal for the roadmap, right? Are we trying to increase the win rate? Are we trying to increase the ASP? Are we trying to reduce churn? Whatever it is, right? And oftentimes there are multiple goals, right? You generally have OKRs, you have something on a quarterly basis that you want to look at. Step 2, start looking at features or solutions, or sometimes you even do this on problems as opposed to features. But let's start scoring the things we could build against our rubric of whatever our goals are. There's a bunch of different talks about this, about how to estimate impact. I actually like this guy, Bruce McCarthy, who's actually launching a book about road mapping, right? So you just score everything 0, 1, or 2. It'll have no impact on the goal. It'll have some impact, or it'll have a lot of impact. Anything beyond that you find is really suspect, right? So can't rate this 1 to 10. So let's just call it 0, 1, or 2. You can do it however you want, but that's where we're going to start. You can guess what we're going to do next. We're going to estimate effort, engineering effort. Again, it doesn't really matter what numbers you use. It's more of like the fact that you're using some at all. So in this case, we often do like t-shirt sizes, right? Small, medium, large, and we like to basically square the number, right? So I'm not a fan of 1, 2, 3 because usually a large engineering effort is not 3x a small one. It's 3 orders of magnitude more. So I like using 1, 2, 4. You can use whatever numbers you want. Again, numbers don't matter. It's consistency. Next thing we do, estimate confidence. How confident are we in either the effort estimate, but really, especially in that goal estimate? We're really trying to measure confidence on the goals. Effort, generally, I think as PMs, we can get decently right, and when we shortlist, we can take the engineering and get it very right. But we're doing, what's our confidence interval on the goals? So you can guess where we're kind of going with this, right? Which is, we do some maths. Goal A plus goal B times confidence divided by effort equals a score, and we restack rank based upon this. How many folks here do something similar to this on a quarterly or biannual level with some of their features and functionality? Cool. Pretty common, and we'll talk more. There's a lot of ancillary benefits to that. I like to talk about, Zynga did this pretty effectively. Their goals were revenue lift or referral lift, right? All they cared about is if I add this new horse stable to Farmville, will it increase the number of people that get referred into Farmville or increase the amount of money we make off of it? It's fantastic. I don't know if you've ever heard the story, but like they would literally look at 20 different things. They would do a lot of analysis to figure out what exactly the impact of these things will be. They would stack rank these 20 things. They would go build the top 3 things. And within 2 weeks, they would know, like, hey, we thought it was going to lift revenue by 0.3%. It lifted by 0.25. Like, to the nines, they knew exactly how to optimize that machine. So I love this model just from a framework because it works so well with them. The challenge for us, how many of you here are B2B companies? Okay. Let me answer another question. How many of you think you have as much behavioral data on your users as Zynga does? Yeah, I don't think so, right? So the challenge, right, is like, unlike gaming, if I don't like the game, I don't play the game. If I don't like your software, if they don't like my software, sometimes I'm still using your software, right? I'm always, we get a lot of things in B2B. It's like, but people are using it day in, day out. How did they churn? Well, because they hated it day in, day out, right? So some companies are going to be 100% behavioral when they do this analysis to inform these impacts and these estimates. I find that most of us live somewhere over here. We do look at behavioral data. It helps us tell where there might be smoke. But a lot of the stuff ends up being qualitative. It ends up being feedback from a customer success team, surveys, you name it. And so it's a mix of both, and so that's the way we have to look at it. So if I go back to, let me just go back. If I go back to this, what's the biggest challenge with this exercise? Where the hell do we pull these numbers from, right? We just kind of pulled these out of our ass and said, here's what the impact is. It gets really fun when you start having multiple PMs do this, right? Okay, we've got 5 PMs on the team or 10 PMs. Each one's going to score their own set of features, and then we're going to globally stack rank them. How do you think that's going to go, right? Oh, well, my thing's like super important. It's going to really affect this goal. So it's really tough sometimes to figure out. How do we figure out? I mean, it's a great exercise. It's certainly better than doing nothing. But the next question comes up. How do we know that, how do we have some validation that these numbers are at all representative? And so what I want to talk about is how we kind of use feedback to de-risk that. So let's just suspend disbelief for a second, and let's assume you had a database that was, everything your customers had said about your product. Assume you have that. We'll talk about how you get that in a minute, but let's just assume you have this database of all the things. Well, if you had the database of all the things that people have said about you, the thing you would want to do, and this is what we do, is, well, I want to associate them to the things I'm considering putting on the roadmap, right? So let's go ahead and connect to customer feedback. Let's see how many customers have asked for something that we're evaluating. I also then obviously want to look at it by percentages. What percentage of our feedback is related to this thing? So I've made some numbers there. So why do we do this, right? Well, the first way we de-risk this is, do the ask back up the estimates? For example, if we see something where it's like, we think there's going to be a really big impact on some goal, we have a high confidence in it, but we don't have very little customer feedback to support that, that doesn't mean that's wrong, but it certainly means we should ask the question to the product team, how are we so confident in this thing? Should the confidence be lower? Should the estimate be lower? Or is it accurate, right? And in this case, my contrived example, let's add in our CRM data, which is something else, like, again, imagine this mythical database has all your feedback data and has your CRM data about spend. Okay, well, now we know the answer. Okay, ask the PM, why are we so confident this would have a big impact on goal B? He said, oh, well, it's because it's our enterprise customers have asked us for this, right? So that's why we're really confident about that. So it's only 3 folks, but they represent $300,000 of revenue. Which brings me to the next thing, are we overstating the impact, right? Because a common thing that happens to us as product people is we get a lot of kind of selection bias by we hear a lot from our top 3 accounts, top 10 accounts. We sometimes have trouble building the case for why we should actually be paying attention to some functionality that doesn't benefit the top 3 accounts, but benefits 30 small accounts, which in aggregate are more. So we like to do this exercise too, because we'll often find that, okay, we have a couple big customers on something, but if you look on this list, the aggregate amount of customer dollars is actually the smallest on that. So I might go to my product team and say, okay, maybe your confidence is right, it'll have an impact, but I don't know if it's going to have that much of impact. And is it really going to have more impact than the rest of these things that have more dollars behind them in aggregate? So that's kind of the second way we de-risk that. The next way to look at this is, let's use a real goal, right? This is a little ephemeral. So let's say one of our goals is actually to reduce churn. So instead of goal A, we've got reduce churn. Well, the thing we would look at is, let's not just line up all customers who have asked for this thing. Let's line up all of our detractor customers and all of our churn customers, and then those dollar amounts and see what we get, right? And so again, this helps us de-risk it even further. Now I look at this and say, gosh, we think that this is going to have a big impact we think feature C is going to reduce churn, and we think it's going to reduce churn more than A, but we have much more demand from the churn customers and detractor customers. Again, this doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means this is something for us to investigate and get comfortable with and de-risk. Because that's what prioritization is about to me. We make our best guess, and we use all the data at our disposal to try to de-risk that. And again, this is what we do, and this is what we talk our best customers through doing, right? So I look at this, okay, maybe we need to reduce the estimates on our reduced churn thing for feature C, and maybe we need to up it for feature A. And finally, the last way we de-risk this is we go into, say, okay, cool, we believe our estimates, we've gone back and checked them, we feel like they check out, we're gonna go build C. What's the first thing when the executive team comes and says, or we've decided, okay, we're gonna go build X? First thing I do and our team does is we gotta go find 10, 20 people that actually want X, and can we go talk to them and validate that that is actually what they wanted, and this mock-up that our design team made actually looks like something they want. And so that's the other way we de-risk this with feedback, right? It speeds our time to go do the research on find out, do we need to build this thing? Is this thing actually even solving the right problem? Was that the actual problem in the first place? How many people do something like this? Cool. Won't talk to you later. So it's a little work. So let's talk about how we get this mythical database, right? I think this sounds good in theory. I think it generally feels like there's a lot of work you have to do to get to this point. And we're product people, we don't have a lot of time to do stuff, right? So let's talk about it. So let's talk about how we build this machine to basically be able to line up with that rubric we had before. There's two channels I want to talk about, right? So if my goal is that I always want to know, my goal is 100%. What do 100%? I want to know feedback from 100% of our customers if possible. To do that, I need to tap into multiple channels. So the two channels I look at are basically direct feedback from users, indirect feedback from sales, support, success, customer-facing teams. Now, both these channels are important, we've found, right? You can't just do one or the other. We've actually found internally, we get about 53% of our feedback directly from customers, but 47% through internal teams. We're UserVoice. We have a brand built on getting feedback in public from people. If we are getting 50% of it from internal teams, I guarantee you will get that much or higher, right? It's not possible for us to go completely direct. And you can see a lot of it's from support, part of sales, success, and these numbers actually scale pretty linearly with the size of those teams. What's really interesting about this, and we found this for other folks, but especially for ourselves, we get different people give feedback. So the other reason why both channels matter to me is they're kind of mutually exclusive, and it kind of makes sense. It's kind of like some people like to watch videos to learn about stuff. Some people like to read the blog posts. Some people don't want to talk to your customer team. They just want to drop their feedback over there. And some people are on your white glove, and they can't be bothered to go to an idea portal or a survey and fill out anything. They're just going to tell their rep on the phone. So we got to do both channels. So let's talk about real quickly how do we do both channels well and how we often get it wrong. So getting feedback from users. No matter how you do it, NPS, idea boards, in-app widgets, usually the key failing point is low response rates, right? We don't get enough people give us feedback. I think most of our companies, feedback to me is like this dirty word. It means useless anecdotes, right? It means statistical noise. And it's because we get vocal noise. We don't hear from enough people. So let's talk about why we don't hear from enough people. One is generally there's a lack of awareness. Most customers still think you don't give a shit about their feedback. That's changing, that attitude is changing a lot. But for many years, every website on the world had a link that said feedback. It was in the footer, you clicked on it, it took you to a form that went to nowhere. So we've trained people for a long time that we don't care about your feedback. And so I'm not gonna go my way to give it. Second thing is, if we do have a way to give feedback, we often make it a lot of work to give it. And lastly, and this one's I think the one we miss a lot, which is, what's in it for me? Why would I even take the time to give you feedback? Even if I was aware that you wanted it, even if you did make it easy to use, how do I do that? Have you ever seen the flying surveys? It's like you go to a website, it's like, take a survey. How many people have ever filled out that? Have you ever clicked on that thing before? Okay. Have you ever finished filling that thing out? I'm in this industry, and I always I should go see how we're doing things today, and I click on it, and it's like, do you have 10 minutes to take a survey? And I'm like, no, I was reading something about my fantasy football team. I don't have time to take your freaking survey. So what's the problem with this, right? It does have good it doesn't suffer from lack of awareness. It's flying across the screen. I'm very aware they want my feedback. However, there's too much work to give it, and there's no what's in it for me. You like my feedback? I don't care. What do I get out of this, right? Even NPS. I've talked to a lot of people about NPS because I think, how many people here do NPS? How many people are gold on NPS? Yeah, okay. The scoring thing's fine. People don't like it. At least it's, especially if you do a pop-up or an email, we're aware that you want the feedback. It's pretty easy to give it, at least to give the score. The problem we found is people don't ever fill in the why. Because there's no value in it for me. Why am I bothering to tell you why I gave you a 5? Because I don't think you're going to follow up with it. Let's see if I put this in here. Yeah, I did. Okay, I'll get this. So let's talk about what we need to do, right? One, we got to promote that we're listening. We actually worked with Stack Overflow many years ago. We're familiar with Stack Overflow, correct? And we invented like these little feedback tabs to put on people's websites, and we just did that to try to break people's mental model that this company here cares about your feedback. The company that got like the most product feedback almost ever was Stack Overflow. And you know what they did? They put red text at the top of their website. It said, "We want your feedback on what we should build next," with a link. Click here. That's all they did. They didn't integrate stuff. They didn't pop up stuff. They just put red text at the top, and people came through. So promote that we're listening. Promote that we're at that. And again, there's something in there. We want your feedback, and what we're going to do with it. We're going to use it to inform what we build. Next, we want to make it a single question if possible, right? The 10-question survey, 10-minute survey is not going to work. And we need to explain what the user gets in return. Again, I'm going to mention our product, but there's a lot of things that can do this. The nice thing about when people go to a UserVoice forum and other idea boards is you could see, oh gosh, I can see whether the company's responding. We actually had a Stanford PhD look at an anonymized set of data and found when companies actually responded to the feedback and users could see that they had responded to the feedback, they're more likely to give it. Makes sense, right? If I see a thing, there's a whole bunch of feedback that nothing's been done on, why am I going to pile on? So we promote, we want your feedback, here's where to give it, here's what we're going to use it for, it's going to inform our decision making, and try to make a single question survey. This is also, you can't possibly read that. This is a thing, there's a guy named Sean Kramer who does a really good talk about voice of the customer programs at Atlassian, and now he's at Amazon. And like I said, the problem with NPS is there's nothing in it for the user with NPS. And so what they would do is when they get NPS results, all of them, but especially ones where people were like a detractor or something and they didn't say why they were unhappy, they send this follow-up email that says, I'll have to paraphrase it. It basically says, we really value your feedback. We use it to inform our product decisions. It explains basically the process. We classify everything to reliability, usability, or functionality. It's reviewed by our product team. Like basically this big write-up of like, we actually pay attention to this stuff. Thank you for filling it out. They find just sending this means next time around, more people actually filled out the why. And not only that, even without doing anything, actually their NPS scores went up just by saying like, we actually do listen to this. I'll tell you, that works for a while. If you don't actually listen to it, then you get this like rebound downward approach. But so that's feedback from internal teams, right? And like I said, what we mostly get wrong is we don't promote it enough. We don't say we want to listen, and we don't tell people, here's what we're going to do with it. And I think that's scary to us as product people because we're afraid, what if we don't want to do what they want us to do? And we often don't. And that's a whole other talk I can get into, but afterwards we can, if you're curious about that, I can tell you about how to get around that. But we shouldn't be afraid of that because it's going to help us de-risk things. Let's talk about internal teams. How many people have like a regular meeting with like a sales or support or success team about, hey, what are you guys hearing on the front lines? I see this a lot. I see it typically manifest itself in a couple ways, but the predominant way is we meet once a week, once a month, once a quarter. We bring a spreadsheet of here's our top 10 asks. And then we'll check back in next month and you tell us if you've done them. And we as product people don't generally like this, right? Why don't we like this? One, I don't know how to compare the number 3 thing from sales from the number 1 thing from support. Which one, like I have no idea, right? 2, I don't know that I really trust it because it's just a list of feature names. I don't know who said it. I don't know what they actually said. Sales is notorious for this, right? Well, we need all these features. And if I go talk to them, no, that's not what they need, right? So it's hard to trust, and it's pretty time-consuming and frustrating for everyone. We did a survey a couple years ago, and this won't surprise you, but like every team wants to influence product, right? Partially for their own self-interest. Sometimes like I want to be able to close more deals. Customer success is gold on retention. They want you to improve the product. But eventually, this process really, because if you can't aggregate the data, if you can't make sense of it, if you don't really trust it, this is kind of a political meeting more than really an effective meeting. So I'll tell you what we've done and what I've seen some other people do, which is either we have a tool for this or you can build your own. Basically build something where they can give you feedback at any time. However, there's a couple rules to giving product feedback. One, we have to know who it came from. You have to tell us this came from user X. 2, you have to show us what they said or always paraphrase what they said. If it's a phone call, what did they actually say in their own words? If it's an email, can you highlight what they wrote? We have PMs. Sometimes we will even, when we do customer interviews, after the customer interview, we'll do a write-up, highlight, here's exactly what they said, and then we'll actually have them associate it to the feature they think this will fix this, right? And we like that, right? We like the last part because it saves us some time of organization. So we put this all together. Let me go skip that. When we put this all together, we end up with a system where whether they come directly to us through a survey or MPS or an idea board, or whether they come through a sales support team, we have this data structure. We have a user. We have exactly what they said, their primary source feedback. We have ideas. Though ideas, to me, are always just kind of like grist for the mill of like, we're going to mine into this and find out what the problem is behind this, right? So I don't necessarily trust. The success team says, we've got 200 people that said the box should be red. That's fabulous. We're not going to make the box red, right? We're going to go, but we believe that those 200 people will probably have one or two of the same problems. And so we'll go ask them to find that out. But it's fine. You've done a lot of good work for us. We needed to know that there were 200 people that had this problem. So we push all of this onto our teams, and by putting it in this data structure, I can now merge it from different sources. So sales, support, direct from customer, I can now put it into a single database. We then have a separate step above that, which we call features, though I often think of them as solutions, right? So now we map things we think about build. We go in there, let's look at the top 10 ideas of our detractor or churn customers. Cool. Well, let me go line up solutions to all of these. Because sometimes a solution will affect multiple ideas, right? Multiple problems can be solved with a single feature you might build. But that's my space as a PM, right? That's where I translate, and I write them in my own language. And finally, we will hook this into customer data. Because we know, this is why we always want to know who the end user is, so that we can eventually go back and pull in whether it's demographic data, CRM spend data, you name it, whatever I may want to segment on, I do it. This is the data structure we found, whether this is what we have in our product, but we've also known people to build this with Salesforce custom objects or you name it. Building this common data structure, making sure you've got basically a standard protocol for how those teams give you feedback. We don't want that monthly meeting. You want feedback? Flag it, send it into us through this mechanism, right? That allows us to get to where we are, which is like we've actually got about, I think at this point, 60% of our customers we have feedback from at any given time. And that's pretty good given that we have a big swath of, we've got really high-end customers, and we've got a bunch of smaller customers that are probably, if I cut this into, people that pay us more than $100 a month, that number's probably closer to 95, 96. And the PM team does less work. So just to wrap up here, what's nice about this is, what's nice about this, right? If I have this database, it helps me really inform and de-risk the product roadmap when I go through that exercise of scoring and ranking functionality. It helps me increase internal confidence in the roadmap. One of the things about doing that framework methodology, and then especially if you can put the framework next to customer asks, it helps you when you're going out to these other teams, sales support success, and saying, we have a system. It's pretty consistent. And this is the number one thing we hear from teams external to product is they get really upset that product feels like product just kind of this on everything. And just saying, hey, we've got a standard system. Here's how it works. It inspires a lot of internal confidence, which is something not to be discounted. Because not having your support teams, your success team, your sales team think you're building the right thing makes your job a lot better. Focus at PM time. Like I said, we did another survey that found 20 to 25% of people's time is what I call building the spreadsheet, talking to those teams, merging things, keeping track of what people ask for. That's not a great use of your time. And when you grow up to being like an enterprise company, usually you like shove that off to you make a new team that their only job is to do that. I'm guessing based upon this conference, we're not probably to that point where we have a whole team that just spends all day churning that data. It ends up falling on us. We don't want that. We want to push that work off to either the end users to organize it for us or the customer-facing teams who are pretty incentivized to organize it for us, right? Support people want to get this out of support queue because they want to close the ticket. Customer success wants to tell you about it because they want the thing to get built so they can have retention so they can hit their goal. And the last thing I'd say is it helps you develop more evangelist customers. And this is the other thing, not to discount too much. I firmly believe 5-10 years from now, all of this will be pretty unsurprising. Right now, though, when you close the loop with a customer that gave you feedback 6 months ago, 9 months ago, and say, remember that thing you asked about? It's now in beta. Would you like to join the beta? Or we got a mock-up of it. Would you like to see it? Or we launched it. People go bananas over that. I was at a meeting at Adobe a couple weeks ago, and they were showing like when they push out updates and say this thing's completed, they get all these tweets being like, oh my gosh, my thing got built. That's not to be discounted. So I ran through a bunch of stuff. We'll have the slides online. We've got a couple ebooks, webinars, videos, and stuff that goes more into all these topics, but I just want to fly through a whole bunch of this stuff. So thank you guys very much.
All right, that essentially concludes Empower. Thank you all again for coming to our inaugural event. We will definitely be hosting this again next year. Super excited, hope to see all of you back. And yeah, without further ado, please feel free to enjoy the cocktails and the networking hour. It's in the same room that lunch was in, just around the corner to your left. Thanks.